between personal and industrial that are going to kind of combine into probably things like driverless cars. Why do I put them in the middle? Because they're certainly personal, but what we see happening with some of the driverless cars is they're going to talk to other cars and talk to the traffic systems in the city. So it's in between the two. We'll have that in office. We'll have it in medical. I already mentioned the medical device monitoring insulin. Do we want that talking to our doctor? That sounds reasonable. How about talking to our insurance company? We got the Americans over here going, no, we don't think we like that idea. And then you have retail. There have been some movies where you walk around, I get it a little bit, I get ads. In Japan, they were in Japanese, which didn't do me a lot of good. But I don't think the smartphone system, but it was for the store I was in, things like that. And I was like, they know where I am. It's
Minority Report.
Yeah, Minority Report there, that's the movie. And that stuff is coming. So first challenge, I'm going to go through these challenges pretty quick. You can find my email and always ask questions on these things. But complex hardware and software. This thing started at the beginning of integrating hardware and software. There's anywhere, depending upon your phone, 10 to 20 sensors in here. They're measuring and affecting the outside world. That makes it different largely than the typical PC. So as testers, you're going to have to not just think about testing the software of these things in my mind. The challenge is you're going to have to think how to test sensors. You're going to have to test actuators. You're going to have to test things on the outside world, possibly physically, that you're less than familiar with. Electronics and things like that. I actually look at IoT as a systems engineering problem and not just a software engineering problem. And what this chart up here talks about, I don't know if the there it is. That's some airplanes that shows the amount of code growing in airplanes from the older airplanes to 777. This is old enough it doesn't have Dreamliner and some of the new Airbus ones. But they've been adding code and code and code and code. I fly a lot. The Boeing Dreamliner is a really nice plane, but their information entertainment system had some bugs. I've seen it in the first times I flew it 2 years ago. I saw a little bit of it just a month ago. Now, not a big deal, right? Well, we've seen some hackers use the network on the plane to hack from the information system into the flight control system. That's bad. That's potentially very bad on these things. And so the world I came out of, this is an embedded diagram from some embedded. When we tested in the embedded world, we were testing the hardware, the software, the environment, and the interactions. My supposition to you all is that in IoT, you're going to have to come up with some new testing approaches and techniques and ideas that are outside of the normal techniques you're used to for just software. Plus, you've got to do all the software ones, too, on these things. There's going to be huge complexity in these things. I mentioned sensors, more and more sensors out there. The actuators and motor controllers, they're controlling the physical world. I haven't mentioned the communication. The other big factor in IoT that makes it different than the old embedded systems, these things are now communicating through near-field communication, Bluetooth Low Energy, Wi-Fi. Some of them even are equipped with full cellular connection. That connection to the outside world changes the game on a lot of things like security and safety. True story here. Dick Cheney, who was the vice president of the United States, had a pacemaker. It had a network connection. He actually had it at Secret Service insistence deactivated so somebody couldn't kill him through hacking his pacemaker. Kind of a weird thing, right? Sounds futuristic, but that's over 10 years ago on that stuff. So you put all these things together, you end up in a system. And I've been a software tester, but I also view myself as a systems engineer. I look at the whole system, the hardware, the software, the operations, how the thing gets used, not just the software and the hardware, but how it's getting used, the ops side. It's going to make it hard. We see these in the areas, and way down there at the end is the one that we start seeing calls for, which are regulations, controls of these things. We see it in self-driving cars, we see it in the security area, and the regulations, a few of us in the room work on those things. I'm not sure I know how to write regulations for these things yet. I study it, it's going to come, but these things are going to affect people's lives, and as soon as that happens, the governments get involved, basically, is what it comes down to. Next big one. Now this is repeated from last year, but you'll hear why I think that's important here in a moment. Security and privacy. We've seen these devices be used since I last did a variation of this presentation. The last, about October time frame, the denial of service attack happened on a bunch of big websites using the Mariah botnet. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But when I last did this presentation, a couple different conferences last year, IoT hadn't been used. It's now been used to do a massive denial of service attack. Medical devices have been hacked. For those of you, anybody got a baby camera or baby monitor? Have you changed your default passwords? Go home and check that. You'll see why in a moment. I do this to my relatives and friends, partially to help, but it is a little scary, I know, when I tell these stories. But why? The mobile systems are these highly integrated, IoTs everywhere, and the security holes abound. People, even smart people like you all in the industry, are blissfully unaware of how terrified those of us, looking at some of these things on the security side are terrified. By the way, I consider myself a novice white hat hacker. Do you know what those guys are? They're the good guys. So I find these things, I try and talk to you all about it. The black hat guys are the bad guys doing these things. We use the same tools and techniques and same websites. I'll show you that in a moment. It's just I do it because I care. They do it to get money usually, or just for the thrill of it, I guess. So I wrote a book. It's now dated in many areas, but the book had a series of attacks on security. I list those here as a reference point, but the book, these attacks are still valid, and the book talks how to do them and what they can be used for. And again, I'm not going to read all of these, but I want to show you where things have just evolved to. Some new attacks, multimodal, different ways to get into the system is what that one's about. The Shodan information, and you can look Shodan up. This is a picture from Shodan. Anybody know what Shodan is? Anybody heard of Shodan? Be scared, be very scared. Shodan it's still up and running. It's quasi-dark web stuff. You know what the dark web is? That's where the black hat guys hang out, but some of us white hat people go in there. And what it is, what it does, it's basically a web search engine, sort of like Google and those things. It's crawling the web through IP addresses. It keeps trying different IP addresses, pinging them until it hits one that recognizes it. It then tries to determine the kind of device it's talking to. And if it can determine the kind of device it's talking to, or even it can't, it starts issuing default manufacturer passwords, which most manufacturers of routers and all these things have, is they have one or two passwords that are defaulted. When it finds a device that's using a default password, it marks it. See the colors? Notice Malaysia down here, colors. The red means that there's found devices in that area. And you can drill down to get to like your neighborhood, your country. You can get down in the picture pretty low level and find out that your neighbor's IoT devices are unsecured, and then you can have fun. Do not do that. I have to give my standard disclaimer now because I teach this kind of stuff. A lot of those things are illegal, okay, unless you have permission. Doing this stuff can be illegal, don't do it. But if you're doing it for your company, if you're doing it as a tester, that's a good job to do, okay? So what we should do as both testers and maybe even designers of these things is assure that default passwords can't be used. Even more, most of you have probably seen websites and things like that that give you the strength of your password as you type it in. We should probably build that into our IoT devices so that not only default passwords can't be used, but so that a good strong password is set up. But you can do location attacks with these things. What these guys are looking for is to use these as a backdoor to get into something, to spy on your children, maybe spy on your husband or wife. In the case of Mariah Botnet, they programmed Mariah Botnet to go out and take these devices over. I've heard different numbers, but somewhere about 2 million to 4 million, mostly web camera devices, were taken over by the Mariah Botnet, a virus basically, which then turned around and launched a denial of service attack against a bunch of very well-known websites around the world. Took them down for a while so they could kill it off. Interestingly, I heard a story, don't know if this is true or not, but actually Mariah was aimed at one particular white hat hacker that a bunch of black hat hackers had something against, because there was this one little small website that was taken down for a bunch of days, as well as the big guys, and the guessing is he was really the target. The other words were just collateral damage. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but it made a lot of sense when I read that. Worms and phishing can be then used. That's really what Mariah Botnet was. And then now in my old age, semi-retirement life, I now practice white hat social engineering. So I go around with social engineering. Isn't that a lovely name? What you're doing is you're watching for people doing dumb things that leave them vulnerable. Like we were in Kyoto last week, and the people using some computers and using cell phones, I could see them typing their password in. And so on checkout I went, not to scare you, and I'm not actually going to do this, but I could get into your system right now because I know your passwords. I don't think the waitress and attendant really appreciated that I was trying to help. But that's what social engineering is. And you can do that, I don't want to say for fun, but you can pay attention to it. But in your companies, you can start doing those kinds of things. And there are now companies specializing in making sure things are secure. And the list will go on, by the way. Closely related to security is privacy. Europe, very big on privacy. United States, kind of in the middle, and I have no idea where Asia is in Malaysia. But privacy becomes an issue for many of us. We don't like the idea of, say, our medical data being shared. Rex over here was a little nervous about those things. But I am too. And it's a concern. You want to look at what can be exposed, medical records, confidential information. We don't want our bank accounts compromised. IoT is going to be potentially vulnerable to these areas and things. So what can we test for? Look for encryption. Is the data encrypted inside of the device? Is the data encrypted going across the comm line? If it's encrypted, what strength is the encryption? Authority, things like biometrics and two-password authentication and things like that. start coming to mind. Smart Apple phone fingerprint, biometrics. It's going to get more and more. Anybody know what bounty programs are? It's an extra way if you really get into this to earn some money.
The beginning, right? That means what? That means estimating testing from the beginning as well. Testing is part of each story work item. Is that you probably? This is the. You guys know who this is? Probably not. It's okay. This is Tom Brady. He's a very famous quarterback in American football, and I like to say that he could play linebacker. But is it best for him to play a different position than what he's best at? Maybe not, but he could. And so the whole point of this is that everybody is good at something, the best on your team. And I think it's important to really think about, okay, so what are these people good at, and have them do those things. Even though they could do other things, think about what they're best at doing and put them in those positions to win. And if you don't have people that are best at those things that the team needs, then you need to find somebody that's really good at that one thing, like him, to do that thing for your team. Sharpen the saw. Test your pairing. I mentioned this. I think it's important to pair in different areas of testing. It's also important to pair with programmers to learn more stuff, right? Let's move on to the next one. Focus on the customer. Help them to understand what their requirements are. Sometimes customers don't understand what's important, and so you have to help them. I was going to play this video, but it's kind of out of context here. Has anybody ever seen the movie Jerry Maguire? Anybody seen Jerry Maguire? So what is one of the most famous phrases in Jerry Maguire's what? What would you say? What is the most famous?
Show me the money.
Show me the money. What else?
Help me, you.
Help me, help you. I just love that. And he goes, help me, help you. And then Cuba Gooding Jr. starts laughing, but that really hits home for me when I talk to customers sometimes. They help me, help you, right? And I'm talking about automation, where I'm trying to get them to tell me what is the most important thing. And they say, oh, we want 100% automation. I said, wait, help me, help you. What is the most important things? Over here. Help. I have actually changed it. I changed it to, let me help you, help me. Let's see here. And the last habit is thinking long term, beginning with the end in mind, doing what's sustainable, right? Working at a constant pace, right? If you're a long distance runner, if you're a marathon runner, which all of us are part of this software, part of our software team, it's not just one sprint, right? It's many sprints, many sprints put together. And I say, develop a long-term agile diet, John. Right? And let me see. How often? I have a good picture here of John. Hold on a second. There. Right? Everybody goes to the gym on January 2nd, January 1st. And so what I think you need to think about is, what can we do in the long term to improve? Not just one sprint, not just one iteration, but in the long term. Have I told you anything you didn't know? Probably not. But I'm hoping that maybe I helped you to look at things from a different point of view, to think about trust at home and in your team that you work with, different things that you can do to put trust into your work. When the doctor tells you to lose weight, is it something new? No. You know that, right? I just hope that I've reinforced some of the things that you already know and maybe put a new angle on things. Yeah, and yes, eating fried foods is not good for you, right? We all know that.
But they taste good.
So, in summary here, Agile is not a technique. It's not a technology, right? You can be Agile without a book. Just like in diet where you think, okay, I want a lifestyle change. You know, Agile is really a work style change. So here's the 7 habits. I put them up here, and I hope that you guys got something out of today in the short time that we had together. So thanks very much. Got some white papers and stuff on our website. Feel free to download them and contact me if you like.